Okay, so part 2 of our point of view lesson deals with the LEQ of how does Andy Mulligan reflect each narrator's voice through his writing style. So based on the words that we see on the page, not based on names that we see, how do we know who is speaking? I know lots of the chapters say in the very first line, it's Raphael again, or Sister Olivia here, but not focusing on those things, focusing more on the actions and the words that are used on the page. Can we figure out who is speaking? So one of the first things we're going to look at today in order to determine who is speaking is sentence structure. We're going to look at the length of the sentences. We're going to look at the types of sentences that they are, the complexity of the sentences. Are they run-ons? Are the characters rambling? How are they putting their ideas together? Do they flow? The other thing that we're going to look at is punctuation. Okay, are they using the punctuation correctly? Are they using commas? Are they using semicolons? Or are they just continuously using periods over and over and over again when they speak? No emotion. The third thing, we're going to look at is word choice. Okay, do they use a sophisticated vocabulary or are they still using a basic vocabulary, which perhaps might reflect their level of education? Another thing we're going to look at is figurative language. Are they using figurative language when they're speaking to compare things or to describe or create a visual image for the readers or their audience? Okay, there's a big difference between somebody who just says, I'm hungry, versus somebody who says, I'm so hungry that I could eat a horse. There's a level of education behind all of that, giving them those different ways to describe their feelings. The last thing that we're going to take a look at is character traits. We're going to look at the characters' actions. We're going to look at the things that they say. We're going to look at their thoughts. And we're also going to look at the way that other people view them to try and figure out some character traits that we might see other places in our story that reflect our characters in these specific chapters. So let's take a closer look at an example from the story. This is early in the story when the police first come to visit the boys in Bahala. But if you take a look at these 2 pages in your story, there are a few things that jump out to me first. And the first one is this paragraph down here at the bottom. All the while, more cars, police cars, then another police car, then a police truck, motorbikes, more police cars, and big cars like government cars. And men in suits as well as police getting out in their nice shoes, getting wet and filthy, and it's still not 7 o'clock and you can't move for the cars and people like it's a festival. So if you were listening to me, you could hear that there's no way that I could say all of that without taking a breath. Well, that says something about our narrator in this chapter. Okay, they're kind of rambling. Their thoughts are kind of all over the place. One huge sentence at the beginning of that paragraph, again, reflecting something about our character. Here's another example. There were kids jumping into the trucks then and picking there on the roadside, but me and Raphael stayed down, listening around for more information. Me wondering all the time where this was going to end, knowing, because I knew that people were going to be angry soon, and it would be these police losing patience first. So again, lots of windy sentences, long sentences, continuously added on to by adding some commas in there. So both of these examples from these 2 pages point to this idea of rambling. Okay, lots of times when we ramble, we're nervous about something, and if you remember back to this part of the story, our characters were kind of nervous about the cops visiting the trash dump, knowing the information that they were holding from them. Again, lots of commas and dashes to continue sentences on, those rambling ideas. This example over here in the second column also points to this idea of incorrect grammar usage. You'll notice that our character mentions me and Raphael. Well, you know that when we're referring to ourselves, we should always say Raphael and I, put the other person first. So there's some grammar mistakes there, pinpointing maybe a lack of education. Another example down at the bottom. When the police get mean, you don't want to be around. On the other hand, I did not want Raphael hiding and drawing attention that way, so that was why I kept him right in the middle of it. Okay, seriousness kind of behind here. We know that this situation is important. Our character's kind of being a little bit protective, and I know from other instances in the story that Gardo is kind of the protector in this threesome of boys. So I'm sorry there, going back here, because of all of this stuff, the lack of education, the being overprotective, this nervousness, this rambling, gives me the idea that it is Gardo that is speaking in this example. On page 32 through 33. This next example I'm going to show you is Father Juilliard on page 52. So what evidence can we find here that it is Father Juilliard? Well, if we take a close look here, we have a simile, climbing the outside like a monkey. He's talking about June, comparing him to a monkey, so we get that visual image. And we mentioned how lots of times more educated people use figurative language when they're speaking. Here in this example, we're using complete sentences. The thoughts are kind of flowing together, again reflecting that idea that Father Juilliard is more educated than some of the others. He uses some sophisticated vocabulary, ointments and plasters. Most of us would just say that we gave him some cream or we gave him some lotion for his wounds or for whatever the issue may have been. Evidently, I don't know too many of you who are going to use the word evidently when you're speaking, and these boys are your age. So again, pointing to that sophisticated vocabulary that Father Juilliard has because of his educational background. Down at the bottom, it says, I broke that rule for June and a handful of others like him, because I've always said that you have to break the rules. I set rules up, then I break them. Okay, he's referring here to providing lunch for June sometimes after class and giving him the ability to take showers and things, reflecting that character trait of caring. Okay, he is caring for the boys, kind of very father-like. Another example on the second page, it says Pascal Aguila, one of the country's lesser-known freedom fighters. The Aguila family donates a large sum of money every year, and they bought those last 6 containers for our upstairs. Okay, pointing to the fact that he knows a lot about the history of the area that he's living in. Lots of the other boys, because they don't come to school, they aren't going to have that historical background that Father Juilliard does. So all of these things pointing to the idea that this is Father Juilliard who is speaking. The figurative language, the sophisticated vocabulary, some of the character traits that we can pull, all back up that idea that this is Father Juilliard. So now what I would like for you to do is to turn to page 40 and 41 and take a look at this chapter that is narrated by Raphael and see if you can find some evidence to back up the fact that this is Raphael speaking. Look at his word choice, look at the figurative language, the sentence structure, and the character traits, and then do the same thing for Rat on page 129 to 131 and record your ideas on the other 2 boxes that you have on your worksheet.